Hello, this is a video clip that shows how you can use Microsoft Excel financial functions to make calculations for arithmetic gradients. The library of functions for Excel does not include any gradient related functions, but it's easy enough to use existing functions such as present value, future value, payment, etc. to make those calculations with Excel. So I'm going to show you three different uh, calculations using those other functions. So first of all, let's create a gradient that we're going to work with. So I'm going to use a gradient of $10, and a pure gradient would have a zero value at year one and then go up $10 every month thereafter. Now, if you haven't seen this before with Excel, you can block two adjacent cells, and if you drag the little plus in the lower right corner, it will create an arithmetic progression of those values. So now we have a gradient. I'm going to use an interest rate of 10%. So for the rate, we use uh, 0.1, excuse me. And if I just block that cell and drag it, it will just duplicate it for all of the time periods. So the first method we're going to use to find the present value of a gradient, this yellow column, we're going to find the present value of each of the cash flows for years 1 through 10. And if I click on this first cell, and if you look up in the formula bar, I've already pulled down the function PV for present value. And what I'm going to do is put in the rate 0.1. Now I could address cell C3, and that would also work just as well. Number of periods is in cell A3, so A3 means it's going to look for the 1 as the number of periods for the present value. There is no payment, so that's a 0, and the future value is what we have in cell B3. In this case, the first year future value of the gradient is 0. And so if I click OK, it puts in the future value. Now notice that I could have typed that right into the formula bar. Now if I click the lower right corner and drag it down, what will happen is that present value formula will go into each of the cells in the column, and it will use the values at the left, the year value and the gradient value, and calculate the present values for all of the years of cash flow. Now I just need to add those up to get the present value. If I click on this first cell, I'm using that empty cell for the sum of those values, and I've chosen the summation function out of the math portion of Excel, and I'm going to sum from cells D3 to D12, and that puts in the present value of $228.91. So that is the first way I could calculate present value, and it's a brute force method. Notice that I can put any values of any cash flows into those time periods, and it would calculate the present value. Now there's another function we can use to do the same thing. It's actually one step smaller than the previous one, and that is the net present value function, and I've loaded it into cell E2, and if you look up in the formula bar, it's the NPV function, and the first cell is the rate, and then our first argument is the rate, and then the values of in progressive order of all of the values of the time period that you want to calculate the net present value. The net present value is um, present value of benefits minus the present value of costs. So all we have to do is to create that is just block the cells that we're working with for all the cash flows, and then it will automatically calculate the net present value. So now we've calculated the present value of a gradient. Pretty simple. The next one is to find the uniform series that's equivalent to the gradient. And the way we do that is we first find the present value of the gradient, which we've already done. And now we treat that uh, as a p-value, and we want to find the equivalent uniform series. And so I'm working on that in this column with the orange background. And the in the first cell below that, for the first cash flow of the uniform series, I've loaded in the payment or PMT function, and the first argument is the interest rate. So you can either put in 0.01 or cell C3. Then the number of time periods, in this case it's 10, and then uh, put in the present value, and I've actually addressed cell F2 because I've already loaded that in from one of the previous answers. And then what that does is it gives me the uniform series or A value for this cash flow. And if I want to drag that down, I can't just drag the little plus sign in this case because it would bring the formula with it. But if I just type it in 37.25, now there's no formula behind it, and I can just drag it down, and now I have my uniform series. So this is how you can use Excel when you have an arithmetic gradient. It's actually pretty simple.